Yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig ah.
What I remember was that it was, a time of great joy. We were all very excited because apartheid was a big part of our upbringing, and no one thought that it would actually come to an end with the freeing of Nelson Mandela. But it was also kind of a scary time, because who knew if blacks were going to want retribution against whites in South Africa, and it was going to blow up into a big mess. Luckily, Mandela was the one that became the leader of South Africa.
Something you don't know about me is that I saw a documentary once about what was happening to the children whose parents in South Africa were imprisoned because of trying to change apartheid. And this man's name was Kenneth Carstens, and he had this South African Children's Fund, and I wrote to him, and he came to New Paltz, and I did a fundraiser for him, and we raised all this money. And he stayed at my house, so I had like hours upon hours to talk to him about what was going on in South Africa. And it really wasn't when Nelson Mandela got freed that there was, I knew that had to come, because change was coming. And this happens again. It was when he became president of South Africa, which was also in the 90's, which was incredible. Like an unbelievable miracle. Like if you imagine the greatest American dissident wanting to change everything about our country, the economic system, the healthcare system, the prison system, the way our government functions, the two-party system, which obviously doesn't work. If somebody was the biggest dissident and they were imprisoned, and then they became president of the United States, that's what that was like.
What I remember about that is that I somewhat wish it was more of a big deal on the news in the United States. I think the media kind of downplayed it a little bit, because it was a real issue. Apartheid was a real issue, especially in the 80s here in New Paltz. I remember as a college student protesting and also taking pictures for the school newspaper at SUNY. A lot of students were active in protesting apartheid. And so when Nelson Mandela was finally freed, yes, it was a big deal, but I think the media here may have downplayed it.
People thought it was great because of the strained relations that we had with Russia.
Ditto.
Treaty between the United States and the USSR regarding attacks, regarding weaponry. It was basically a compromise between the two countries to get along.
My reaction was good because I'm all for reducing the amount of nuclear weapons across the world, and everyone that I know that I live near, I believe, feels the same way as I do. So I think in our community, a lot of people were happy to reduce the amount of nuclear weapons, and that are being, they still have the nuclear weapons, and I'm not sure what they're going to do with them, or maybe they're not producing more, but in any event, it was a good thing. And I don't remember more than that.
Yeah, in the events previous to that, where like the Berlin Wall came down, Germany was reunified later on. These were all my entire life. From the time I'd been raised, there was the evil Russian Empire, and Germany was no good, and it was split in pieces. And finally, it was a sense of relief. And I think this is what boosted Bill Clinton's first term, was everybody had this sense of elation that everything was completely copacetic at this point. The world problems that they'd been fighting for 60 years had ended, and things were going to be good again.
I just remember it being all over the news, but it didn't have a great impact on me. I guess that's one of the blessings to being a citizen in the United States of America, because our military works so hard to protect us that major wars could be going on in other countries and you don't even realize it. And so I know it was all over the media, but it wasn't something that directly impacted me.
I don't remember a lot about the end of the Cold War, but I remember it being in the news and it being a big deal. And of course, it's a good thing, even though I feel like a lot of it was just a way for our government to keep making weapons and pumping up the whole threat idea so that people could live in fear, and it kind of justified the need to have a strong military, and but I don't think the threat was really that real. Maybe it was at one time, but not towards the end. And so I think my feelings were, oh, it's about time. And everybody else, you know, that found out too was probably thinking, yeah, let's put an end to this. And I was happy.
Well, Bill Clinton was the first president from my generation. Up until then, every president had been older, like my parents' generation or a little bit younger. And the biggest thing I remember about his election was that at the inaugural ball they played rock and roll instead of all the old music. And I also remember all the controversy and how humiliating it was, particularly for me. All the gossip and how many women he'd had sex with and all of that. And then that was really the first big political scandal like that, and everybody got so excited about it and got so into it. We've had nothing but that kind of bullshit.
I think that he was a great president. I was excited when Bill Clinton became president because finally it seemed like there was a president who was interested in the concerns of people of color, somebody who was interested in the concerns of middle-class Americans and poor people. And so it was great to have a president who actually cared about the people, and whereas in the past it just seems like it was just straight politics. He was a very relatable type of person, and so that was great to have a president like that. And I was excited for his election each time when he won. There was talk of him being impeached, but he was never actually impeached.
His impeachment didn't really seem to have an effect because of course he continued to serve his presidency. It didn't really seem to have an effect on America. It was almost like a mockery type of thing, especially after his affair with Monica Lewinsky.
What I remember most about Bill Clinton's election was that him and Al Gore were young, and it came at a time when the country was really, coming off of the Reagan years, very happy and very excited, and to have these young politicians looking toward the future, the potential looked unlimited.
What are your opinion about his impeachment?
Well, that's probably the low point of this country's political life, where politics just got in the way, and Bill Clinton's impeachment was a waste of everyone's time, money, and, useless effort. It was sad.
I believe that was when a truck drove under the trade centers, and it was thwarted, and the bomb didn't go off, or for some reason it didn't end up working and destroying the trade centers. And I think the media probably went nuts. And I actually remember seeing the truck, or seeing it on the news, and the media usually goes nuts about that stuff. And
after the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, the media was involved, but not nearly as much as it was after 9/11. There were no precautions taken. Certainly people didn't look at it the way that we did 9/11. We were at war.
Yeah, and if they didn't take enough precautions, that's for sure, to protect the country against terrorism. Should have done a lot more about it.
Yeah, there wasn't a big deal about terrorism being a part of that at that time. It was found out later on, but certainly they were coming back for us, and nobody paid attention to that.
Well, what I remember about the U.S. involvement in Kuwait and Iraq, first of all, I know that Iraq was an ally of the U.S. And I also know that Kuwait and Iraq had problems. Apparently, I don't know if it's true or not, but Kuwait was drilling sideways into Iraqi territory, and the U.S. was made aware of Iraq's grievances against Kuwait. And I specifically remember when Saddam Hussein threatened to invade Kuwait, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq basically said it was an internal Iraqi affair with Kuwait and that the U.S. would look the other way, which is surprising to me since right after the U.S. invaded Kuwait, Bush, who was president at the time, Bush Sr., basically attacked Iraq for invading Kuwait when they knew the situation was escalating. I think it could have been de-escalated, but there must have been some other reasons why this was allowed to happen this way. So to me, again, I see that there were other forces at work, not necessarily just the attack on Kuwait.
Okay, so during the 90s, the Gulf War, there were Scud missile attacks on Israel, which required Israeli children and their parents to put on gas masks in case the missiles landed and exploded and killed people, which of course was terrible. I would not have ever wanted to have to put a gas mask on a 2-year-old child or a 3-year-old child because there could be a bomb that dropped. However, thousands of Iraqi children and thousands of Iraqi adults and people called collateral damage civilians were killed in Iraq. During that period of time, the synagogue that I'm a member of in New Paltz, and I love those people very much, they had a meeting, and people were extremely upset about the Scud missile attacks on Israel, and they wanted to do something to help. And they were also very upset about the children. And I don't know why I'm always in this position politically, but I sat at that meeting and I kept thinking, can we talk about the other children, the innocent Iraqi children? Are we always going to have this consciousness where Jews take care of Jews and Muslims take care of Muslims and right-wing Christians take care of right-wing Christians? And it just made me very sad. And I think I got up in the synagogue and actually said something to that effect, and it didn't really go over that well.
The O.J. Simpson trial garnered more media attention than any other event, as far as I'm concerned, in history.
Way too much.
Way too much. That every single step he made, everything he did, every bit of the trial, after the trial, the lawsuits following it, it was totally a media showcase.
The O.J. Simpson trial, well, it was very polarizing between black and white people. And given my history, especially now working in the prison and how many articles I've written about black history, it was really upsetting to me to see that poor black people who in no way had anything in common with O.J. Simpson were so excited when a black man got free. But the reason he got free was he had a lot of money and he played that race card. Most people don't know it, but in his house he had pictures of himself with a lot of white celebrities. And before the jury came to look at his home, they replaced them with all pictures of black people. And I felt that real grassroots black people were emotionally manipulated by that trial, because it wasn't like an ordinary black man who was poor and who was innocent and who got off because justice was done. I don't think justice was done in the O.J. Simpson case. He committed the murder and he got off. And he partly got off because he had money and fame.
Atlanta, Georgia, and I remember a bomb went off in the park that hurt some people, and the media immediately jumped on it that it must be a terrorist from another country trying to destroy the Olympics. And if I remember correctly, it turned out to be a former police officer from Georgia who was trying to get at his ex-wife.
Hi, thank you.
Yes.